Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Friday, May 31st, and today is day 238 since October 7th. The big news here in the United States is that a New York jury has found Donald Trump guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records to conceal the hush money payments to an adult film actress, which is delivering a historic verdict that could shape the November presidential elections. And this also makes former President Trump the first former US president convicted of a crime. It is important to note that there are legal questions at play. It is possible for him to run in the presidential elections in November, but there's legal questions such as, will it be possible for him as a convicted felon to be able to get a security clearance if he is elected president in the November elections? Those elections will have a significant impact on what's happening in Gaza and in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, and of course, the broader Middle East. It has not only been widely assumed, but there's evidence that Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel has been waiting for a Trump presidency. Netanyahu reportedly this last month met with 3 foreign policy envoys who've been working with presidential candidate Trump, who could still win despite the conviction and despite having falsified those records. Though it's unclear how a Trump presidency or how Trump might have handled the situation in Gaza differently than President Biden, Trump has invoked Biden's friction with Netanyahu as evidence of US failure. Trump has also expressed very little sympathy for Palestinian suffering. So there's deep concerns that in November, there's deep concerns now with Biden's presidency, and if Trump were to be elected, there's deep concerns because of a lack of any sympathy for Palestinian suffering and, Trump's positions as well. Trump has told donors that if he returns to the White House, he would severely crack down on pro-Palestinian groups in the United States, specifically at US universities. He said that he would deport foreign students who participated in university protests on behalf of Palestinian causes. And most news sources are saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu would benefit significantly, immensely, that he did so under Trump's first term as president, and that arguably right now he's hoping for a second term presidency from former President Trump. In the interim, Netanyahu has openly rejected the Biden administration's hopes for the PA, the Palestinian Authority, to take a lead in the post-war administration in Gaza. And Netanyahu and his allies have shown no interest in even engaging the Biden administration on reviving pathways for a Palestinian state. Contrary to the Biden administration's wishes, Netanyahu may soon act on an invitation from Republicans to speak to a joint session of Congress in Washington, D.C. There was breaking news not only in the United States, but also in Gaza as well. The Israeli military has confirmed that they're now operating in central Rafah for the first time. That is in opposition to warnings from the United States. It's been reported that they are pushing into the most populated areas of Rafah. This has started and has been happening in the last couple of days. They are knocking down buildings that are in the way. They are seeking reportedly to dismantle Hamas. Their goal is to establish a line of control along the Egyptian border. We've been talking about that Philadelphia corridor, which is so significant that they state that they have control of now. According to satellite imagery and videos, the Biden administration has warned against major operations in these populated areas of Rafah, and to no avail. The Washington Post has put out this breaking news, as did the New York Times. The New York Times said that Israel's invasion of central Rafah is defying international pressure. I've also been saying for a couple of months, while these attacks have had such disproportionate effects on Gaza's civilian population, the West Bank has also slowly been going up in flames. Israeli forces literally ignited a devastating fire in Ramallah, in Al-Bireh, which the main vegetable market in the occupied West Bank. yesterday was destroyed, where dozens of shops that were owned by Palestinians were either burned to the ground or experienced severe damage. The reports are saying millions of shekels in losses for numerous Palestinian businesses. Troops raided the neighboring West Bank cities at dawn. They fired live ammunition, stun grenades, and tear gas into residential areas in the local market, which is known as Al-Hisba. Wooden carts caught on fire, flames spread throughout the market into nearby commercial buildings. At least one person was wounded. More than 100 stalls and shops were ravaged, according to Albire's acting mayor, Al-Khatib. Initial losses from the devastation are estimated at the tens of millions of shekels, according to one Arab news source. One of the shop owners said, "I just don't know what to do. Everything's like a nightmare. I can't believe this has happened. My work for many years has disappeared in just moments." At least 34 vendors were impacted by the fire. Mohamed Adwa is an owner of a clothing store, and he said his losses alone were about the equivalent of 94,000 US dollars. He supports a family of 6. He also supports his brother's family of 7. He's been working in that market for 17 years. When he heard about the fire, he and his brother tried to reach the area, but they were blocked by Israeli forces who prevented anyone from approaching. He said, "When we finally made it, the fire was huge. It had consumed everything. We couldn't stand in front of it, and we were just helpless." According to Al-Khatib, the Israeli forces prevented firefighters from accessing the market for nearly an hour, which was part of the reason the fire was allowed to spread. Al Jazeera had a correspondent on the scene who reported that many of the vendors at the market, for many of the vendors, those stalls were their only source of income. We're seeing this happen more and more, where there are numerous raids throughout the West Bank, and this assault was one of those. There were other raids that included a currency exchange office that was stormed. There were reports that equipment was confiscated and several workers there were arrested. Israeli forces reportedly raided money exchange shops, and they've been doing these raids and assaults increasingly since October 7th. On May 11th, there were 11 branches of the same company that were stormed, where more than 1 million shekels, I presume, were confiscated. In December, several exchange companies lost around $300 in similar raids. Israel is set also, this is other news, to launch a travel authorization program for foreign visitors to the country, which will begin this pilot program starting on Saturday. I think tomorrow is when this starts. This will include travelers arriving from the United States and Germany. This is quite significant. You should check the Israeli travel authorization website. This program is similar to those used in the United States, Canada, and Australia, and it will require non-Israeli passport holders traveling to the country to obtain electronic travel authorization through Israel Entry. There's a website before setting off on their trip. In a statement this week, their population and immigration authorities said the new program is aimed at improving security, immigration, and general services. So we need to check and verify if this is going to apply to American travelers who are just visiting. The ministry said it will help authorities to obtain information about passengers before they even board a plane. If a problem arises, it will prevent them from entering Israel. The passenger will be referred to the Israeli embassy in their country of residence. It will prevent any unpleasant surprises for passengers who land at the border and then are refused entry, according to Israel's Ministry of Tourism. They said the new system will speed up online confirmations. It will allow for simplified, stress-free entry. Over the past 2 years, Israel slowly reopened its border after COVID to tourists. They said that there have been lengthy waits at passport control in Tel Aviv. The ministry said that starting on July 1st, travelers from all visa-exempt countries will be able to take advantage of this pilot program. And from August 1st, the new system will be instituted as the new entry protocol for all incoming travelers from visa-exempt countries. So this is really disconcerting because, Israel was just allowed in this visa waiver program. So Israelis don't need to get visas to come into the US. And so this pre-approval is essentially like the equivalent almost of getting a visa, because you have to get permission ahead of time, if my understanding of that reading is correct, which is big, big news. Also, a career State Department official involved in the Biden administration's contentious debates over Israel's conduct in Gaza resigned this week, citing disagreements with a recently published U.S. government report that claimed that Israel was not impeding humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Two officials told the Washington Post. They were referring, of course, to the presidential Memorandum 20 that we've talked about so much. The official's name was Stacey Gilbert. She served in the State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. Gilbert sent an email to staff Tuesday explaining her view that the State Department was wrong to conclude that Israel had not obstructed humanitarian assistance into Gaza. Officials who read the letter said, the cause for resignation is unusual because it speaks to internal dissent over a hotly disputed report that the Biden administration relied on to justify continuing to send billions of dollars of weapons to Israel. I wanted to call your attention to a religious news services article about a recent push amongst Christian organizations to support boycott, divestment, and sanctions. You know, I'd mentioned earlier that one of CMEP's main priority is the right for Americans to be able to engage in nonviolent strategies, such as BDS, on both federal and state levels. An example of a boycott that's being called for relates to Chevron, for example, that American Friends Service Committee, one of CMEP's members, is helping to lead the way. Chevron, for example, supplies Israel's war efforts. They're providing light and power. They're also the co-ownership of one of the major gas fields that's right off the coast of Gaza. And so I'd encourage you to look at AFSC's news about that. They're producing natural gas 12 miles offshore of the Gaza Strip and have been doing so since after the October 7th Hamas attacks. Also, I wanted to call your attention, Bethlehem Bible College put out a call for prayer, saying that a week ago, we concluded our Christ at the Checkpoint conference with a prayer for our land and our situation. Continue to pray for us, for this land, for freedom, for peace, for justice, and for our rights. In addition, His Holiness Pope Francis is set to commemorate the 2014 Invocation for Peace in the Holy Land. 10 years later, he, along with the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, Bartholomew, and leaders of Israel-Palestine, the Pope will commemorate the historic anniversary and issue another appeal for peace as the war in the Holy Land continues. And so we join with His Holiness Pope Francis, His Beatitude Patriarch Bartholomew, and other global Christian leaders in their calls for peace, and we will continue to work to that end.